The A&E series, The Secrets of Playboy, which examined the dark side inside the Playboy mansion, was such a hit.
Beneath the glamorous parties, silk robes, and iconic mansion, Hugh Hefner's world wasn't as perfect as it seemed. While Hefner presented a life of luxury, freedom, and indulgence, there was a darker side lurking behind his mansion's gates. From controlling relationships with his live-in girlfriends to bizarre rituals involving baby oil and secret shoeboxes full of explicit photos, Hefner's carefully curated image began to crack. His former wife, Crystal Hefner, exposed chilling details: lovebirds that mysteriously died in his room, a life of manipulation, and shocking demands he made on the women around him. Even the iconic Playboy mansion itself, with its black marble bathroom and suffocating atmosphere, became a symbol of the control and power he wielded. But the most disturbing truths were still waiting to be uncovered. So join us as we get into the gritty details of Hugh Hefner's dark side. The beginnings of Hefner. It all started on a spring day in Chicago on April 9th, 1926. Hugh Hefner, or Hef, as people would come to call him, was born into a family that seemed simple enough. His father, Glenn Lucius Hefner, was an accountant, and his mother, Grace Caroline Hefner, worked as a teacher. They lived a modest, conservative life in the Midwest, and his parents had roots in Nebraska. But the world was about to find out that Hugh Hefner's life was going to be far from ordinary. Little Hugh wasn't born into fame or fortune. His family was quite reserved and religious, belonging to the Methodist faith. His mother, Grace, even dreamed that one day her son would become a missionary, spreading faith and good words around the world. But fate had something entirely different in mind for young Hef. You see, while his parents' expectations were grounded in tradition, there was a streak of creativity and boldness in Hugh that would eventually lead him down a very different path. As a young boy, Hugh was imaginative and curious, but life at home was strict and somewhat unemotional. Imagine growing up in a house where expressing feelings wasn't really encouraged. That was Hugh's world, but he didn't let it hold him back. Instead, he used his imagination to escape into a world of fantasy, creating comic books and stories, which was just the beginning of his creative journey. Now here's a twist. Hefner wasn't just any boy from the Midwest. Through his father's lineage, he was actually a descendant of William Bradford, a man who had been the governor of Plymouth Colony way back in the 1600s. Hef had some pretty famous ancestors. But while his family might have been historically important, Hef was about to make a name for himself in ways no one could have predicted. Hef attended Sayre Elementary School and later Steinmetz High School, and like many young men of his time, he joined the Army during World War II. But even here, his role wasn't typical. While other soldiers were out fighting, Hef became a writer for a military newspaper, sharpening the skills that would later help him build an empire. After his service, he went on to study at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, where he earned a degree in psychology. Interestingly, Hef managed to complete his degree in just 2.5 years. He even dabbled in creative writing and art, showing that he was destined for something out of the ordinary. Now, after college, life seemed to be taking a traditional route. He enrolled in graduate courses at Northwestern University, but didn't stick around for long. He dropped out, a decision that would change the course of his life forever. Let's pause for a moment. Imagine you're Hugh Hefner in the early 1950s. You've got a regular job working as a copywriter for Esquire, a popular magazine at the time. Things seem stable, but here comes the twist. Hefner asked for a raise, just a $5 bump, but his bosses said no. So, what did he do? He quit. Yes, Hefner walked away from a steady job, and it was a risky move. Little did anyone know, it was the first step toward building one of the most iconic magazines in history. In 1953, with no job but plenty of ambition, Hefner scraped together $600 from a mortgage loan. He gathered money from friends and family, including $1,000 from his own mother. Now, here's a touching moment. His mother didn't invest in his dream because she believed in the idea of Playboy. No, she believed in her son. And with that, Hefner set off on an adventure that would change pop culture forever. The best decision of his life. The first issue of Playboy was born in December 1953, and guess who graced the cover? None other than Marilyn Monroe, though she didn't actually pose for the magazine. The photos were from an earlier nude calendar shoot, but it didn't matter. This first issue was an instant hit, selling more than 50,000 copies. Marilyn's fame, combined with Hef's vision, made the magazine an overnight sensation, even though Monroe herself didn't make a dime from it. And here's a fascinating detail. Hefner never met Monroe in real life, but decades later, in 1992, he bought the crypt right next to hers in a Los Angeles cemetery for a whopping $75,000. It's as if, even in death, he wanted to be close to the icon that had launched his empire. But Hefner's journey wasn't without controversy. In 1955, Esquire rejected a story titled The Crooked Man, which was about a world where homosexuality was the norm, and straight men were persecuted. Hefner, always pushing boundaries, published the story in Playboy instead, and it stirred up quite a bit of outrage. Hefner responded with a bold statement. If it was wrong to persecute heterosexuals in a homosexual society, then the reverse was wrong too. It was moments like this that began to show the world that Hefner wasn't just about glamorous parties and beautiful women. He had a strong sense of justice and wasn't afraid to use his platform to challenge societal norms. As the 1960s rolled in, Playboy grew into much more than just a magazine. It became a cultural movement. Hefner launched television shows like Playboy's Penthouse and Playboy After Dark, where celebrities, artists, and intellectuals gathered to talk about everything from music to politics. Hefner himself became the face of a lifestyle, one of luxury, freedom, and indulgence. But with fame came trouble. In 1963, Hefner found himself in legal hot water when he published an issue of Playboy featuring nude photos of actress Jane Mansfield. The authorities arrested him, charging him with promoting obscene literature. The case went to trial, but it ended with a hung jury. Hefner walked away, unscathed but certainly more famous than ever. Then came the 1960s civil rights movement, and once again, Hefner was ahead of his time. He opened Playboy clubs that were racially integrated, a bold move at a time when segregation was still common in America. Hef even sent Alex Haley, a black journalist, to interview the founder of the American Nazi Party, George Lincoln Rockwell. Imagine the tension in that room. Rockwell only agreed to the interview after confirming that Haley wasn't Jewish, and he kept a handgun on the table the entire time. It was a dangerous moment, but it resulted in one of the most memorable interviews of the era. As Hefner's fame grew, so did the criticism. By the 1970s, feminist groups had started to challenge the image of women in Playboy. Hefner, always outspoken, pushed back, arguing that Playboy promoted a romantic, glamorous view of relationships. Still, the debates raged on, but Playboy remained a powerful cultural force. And then, in the later years of his life, something interesting happened. Hugh Hefner, the man who had spent decades at the center of glamour and controversy, began to settle into a quieter role. He made cameo appearances on television shows like The Simpsons, Sex and the City, and even Family Guy. He became a pop culture icon, known for his signature pipe, his silk pajamas, and his famous Playboy mansion, where he lived surrounded by beautiful women and celebrity friends. But Hefner's personal life was just as dramatic as his public persona. How his personal life was going. Hefner married Mildred Williams in 1949, and they had 2 children, Christy and David. But their marriage had its dark moments. Mildred admitted to having an affair while Hef was in the Army, a confession that shattered him. Surprisingly, they stayed together for a while longer, with Mildred even allowing Hef to be with other women in an attempt to save their marriage. They eventually divorced in 1959. After the divorce, Hef fully embraced the lifestyle he had been promoting in his magazine. He dated numerous women, many of them Playboy playmates, and became known for his extravagant parties at the Playboy Mansion. In 1971, he moved permanently to Los Angeles, where the mansion became legendary for its wild gatherings. But in 1985, at age 58, life took a turn. Hefner suffered a minor stroke, and it made him rethink everything. The all-night parties slowed down, and he handed much of the business over to his daughter, Christy, who had become an accomplished businesswoman in her own right. In 1989, Hefner married again, this time to Playmate of the Year, Kimberly Conrad, who was 36 years younger than him. They had 2 sons, Marston and Cooper, and for a while it seemed like Hef had settled into a quieter, family-focused life. But by 1998, the couple separated, and Hef continued to live a life surrounded by young women at the mansion. Even into his later years, Hefner's personal life remained headline news. He dated as many as 7 women at once, all of whom lived at the mansion. Shows like The Girls Next Door gave the world a glimpse into life at the Playboy Mansion, featuring his relationships with Holly Madison, Bridget Marquardt, and Kendra Wilkinson. But by 2008, all 3 women had left the mansion, and Hefner's love life continued to evolve. In 2010, he began dating Crystal Harris, and in 2012, they got married after a brief engagement breakup the previous year. Harris became Hefner's 3rd and final wife. But this entire time, the most mysterious part of his life was the Playboy Mansion. Secrets within the mansion. The story of the Playboy Mansion begins in a way that no one could have predicted. Imagine it's the early 1970s, and Hugh Hefner, the founder of Playboy magazine, is searching for a new home. But not just any home. He's looking for a place that will reflect the glamorous and extravagant lifestyle that he has become famous for. And then, he finds it. A mansion in Holmby Hills, Los Angeles, not too far from the glitzy Beverly Hills. This is where the legend of the Playboy Mansion truly begins. But here's the thing. It wasn't even Hefner's idea to buy this mansion. It was Barbie Benton, his girlfriend at the time, who convinced him to go for it. She saw potential in this massive house with its unique Gothic Tudor architecture, and Hefner was sold. Little did they know that this house would become one of the most infamous party spots in Hollywood history. Once Hefner moved in, the Playboy Mansion quickly transformed into more than just a home. It became a symbol of luxury and indulgence. The 1970s rolled in, and with them came the lavish parties that would be talked about for decades. Celebrities, musicians, and socialites all flocked to the mansion, where the nights were filled with laughter, music, and mystery. The events held there were legendary, and they solidified the mansion's place in pop culture history. But this was just the beginning. Now, let's step back for a moment. Before the Playboy Mansion in Los Angeles, there was another Playboy Mansion. The original one was in Chicago, in the Gold Coast district. It was a grand brick and limestone building built way back in 1899. Hefner had started Playboy in Chicago in 1953, and the mansion he lived in there became a symbol of his success. But when Hefner decided to make the big move to California in 1975, everything changed. You see, Hefner had a vision for his new mansion in Los Angeles. It wasn't just going to be a place to live, it was going to be an experience. After the company purchased the mansion for a little over $1 million, they spent millions more to renovate and expand it. Hefner's new home was more than just a house. It was a castle of dreams. The mansion, sitting on over 5 acres of land, had everything you could imagine. A screening room with a pipe organ, a game room, zoo buildings, a tennis court, and even a swimming pool with a grotto. The grotto, with its hidden nooks and crannies, became one of the most famous parts of the mansion. This was where guests would gather, escaping into a world that felt far removed from reality. The whole mansion was like stepping into a fairy tale, except this was no ordinary fairy tale. It was Playboy's world, a world of fantasy and indulgence. As the parties raged on, the mansion became a living legend. Everyone wanted to experience the magic of Hefner's home. But as grand as the mansion was, there were also rumors. Some guests described it as feeling old and worn, with furniture that didn't match and a general sense of decay. One of Hefner's former girlfriends even mentioned in her memoir that the house had a peculiar smell, thanks to the house dog who would occasionally relieve himself on the curtains. These stories only added to the mystery surrounding the Playboy Mansion. What was really going on behind those iconic gates? As the years passed, Hefner's life evolved, and so did the mansion. During his marriage to Kimberly Conrad in the 1980s and 90s, the mansion took on a more conservative tone. It was no longer just a party house. It became a family home. Hefner and Conrad even bought the mansion next door to serve as the home for their two sons, Marston and Cooper. But despite the changes, the Playboy Mansion never lost its allure. It remained a symbol of a lifestyle that was both admired and criticized. By the early 2000s, Hefner purchased another house nearby, the Bunny House, to give playmates and guests a more private space away from the hustle and bustle of the main mansion. And in 2016, after decades of hosting some of the most famous parties in Hollywood, the mansion went up for sale. The price? A jaw-dropping $200 million. But there was a catch. Hefner had to be allowed to live there for the rest of his life. In the end, the mansion was sold for $100 million to Darren Metropolis, who promised to restore the mansion to its former glory. But the story doesn't end there. After Hefner passed away in 2017, more tales about the mansion began to surface. Allegations of drug and sexual abuse during Hefner's lifetime came to light, casting a shadow over the glitz and glamour that had once surrounded the mansion. The once legendary house became a subject of controversy as people began to question what had really happened behind its walls. Still, the mansion was protected. In 2018, Darren Metropolis entered into an agreement with the city of Los Angeles that would protect the mansion from being demolished. It was now considered a piece of history, and Metropolis promised to restore it to its original grandeur, ensuring that the Playboy Mansion would stand as a lasting monument to the life and legacy of Hugh Hefner. But what was it like inside? Let's take a walk through its halls. The mansion was enormous, with nearly 30 rooms, each one designed with a touch of Gothic charm. Hefner's personal suite, located on the second and third floors, was his private sanctuary. It had been renovated and decorated in the 1970s with carved oak details, giving it an air of mystery and elegance. The rest of the mansion, though, remained true to its original style, with dark furnishings and Gothic revival touches that made it feel like you had stepped back in time. There was a secret wine cellar, too, hidden behind a door from the Prohibition era. Imagine finding that hidden passage, leading you to a room filled with bottles of wine and stories from another time. And then there was the game house, a separate building filled with all kinds of entertainment, pool tables, vintage arcade games, and even jukeboxes. It was a place to escape, to lose track of time and reality. Outside, the mansion was surrounded by lush landscaping. There was a koi pond with an artificial stream, and even a small orchard with citrus trees. Forests of tree ferns and redwoods added to the magical atmosphere. And of course, there was the famous grotto, a secretive, cave-like area by the swimming pool where guests could disappear into the water, away from prying eyes. As the years went by, the mansion continued to host everything from television productions to charity events. It was more than just a home, it was a piece of Hollywood history. Films like Beverly Hills Cop 2 and music videos like Weezer's Beverly Hills were filmed there. The mansion was even featured in the reality TV show The Girls Next Door, giving the world a peek inside its mysterious walls. But the mansion wasn't just a place of fame and luxury. In 2011, It made headlines for an entirely different reason. During a conference event held at the mansion, over 100 guests fell ill, suffering from fever and respiratory problems. An investigation revealed that the mansion's famous grotto was the source of a bacterial outbreak, Legionnaire's disease to be exact. The story only added to the mystique of the Playboy Mansion, a place where fantasy and reality often blurred. By the time Hefner passed away, the mansion had become much more than just a house. It was a symbol of an era, a monument to a man who had built an empire on the idea of freedom and indulgence. But it was also a place where darker stories emerged, where questions about power and control came to the forefront. A man of strong ideas. Hugh Hefner was a man who lived a life full of controversy, parties, and big ideas, but behind all the glamour, he had strong opinions about politics, philanthropy, and the world around him. Let's start at a point in time when he wasn't just the founder of Playboy, but someone who used his influence in ways that surprised many people. In 1966, a momentous debate took place. Hugh Hefner, the man known for revolutionizing the magazine industry with Playboy, sat down to argue with William F. Buckley Jr., a political commentator, on a show called Firing Line. The topic was Hefner's philosophy behind his magazine. This wasn't just a casual conversation, it was a heated debate that brought Hefner's bold ideas to the forefront of American society. Hefner passionately defended the freedom of speech and expression, principles that formed the foundation of his work. The debate became a significant moment in his career, showing that Hefner wasn't just about glossy pages and centerfolds. He was deeply involved in the political and social discussions of the time. Years later, this commitment to free speech would take on a more formal shape. His daughter, Christy Hefner, created the Hugh M. Hefner First Amendment Award, a recognition designed to honor those who fought to protect the right to free speech in America. The award stands as a testament to how seriously Hefner took these rights, something he had championed throughout his life. But Hefner's involvement in politics wasn't limited to free speech. He was an active supporter of the Democratic Party, donating and raising funds for their causes. He believed in the ideals they represented, but as time went on, he became increasingly frustrated with the political landscape. In 2011, Hefner, feeling dissatisfied with both major political parties, called himself an independent. However, when the 2012 election rolled around, he put his support behind Barack Obama for a second term as president, demonstrating that his political leanings still held firm. Now let's go back to the 1970s, where one of Hefner's more surprising contributions took place. Have you ever wondered about the famous Hollywood sign? That iconic symbol overlooking Los Angeles wasn't always in great shape. In fact, by 1978, it had fallen into disrepair. This is where Hefner stepped in. He organized a fundraising event at the Playboy Mansion and even personally bought the letter Y in a ceremonial auction. His contribution helped restore the Hollywood sign, saving it from potential ruin. It's fascinating to think that a man known for his glamorous parties was also a key player in preserving one of the most famous landmarks in the world. As much as Hefner was involved in politics, he had strong views on religion too. In a 2000 interview with Playboy, he made a statement that shocked many people. "It's perfectly clear to me that religion is a myth." He believed that humans had invented religion to explain things they couldn't understand. This wasn't the only time he expressed such thoughts. Christian author Lee Strobel once interviewed Hefner about his beliefs, describing Hefner's view of God as very minimalistic and distant. Hefner wasn't deeply religious, and his thoughts on these matters were complex, making him a figure of both admiration and criticism. But Hefner wasn't all about debate and controversy. He was also known for his charitable work. In fact, he donated $100,000 to the University of Southern California to create a course on censorship in cinema. aiming to educate people on how movies had been shaped by censorship throughout history. Hefner didn't stop there. He also donated $2 million to endow a chair for the study of American film. The university honored him by renaming its audiovisual archive to the Hugh M. Hefner Moving Image Archive. Hefner's philanthropy extended far beyond politics and education. Through his charitable foundation, he contributed to numerous causes, including animal rescue organizations. He hosted fundraiser events for Much Love Animal Rescue and Generation Rescue, an organization that promotes autism awareness, though it has faced controversy for its anti-vaccination stance. In 2010, another act of generosity stood out. Hefner donated the last $900,000 needed to protect the land around the Hollywood sign from being developed. His commitment to preserving the iconic vista was evident as he stepped up when it mattered most, ensuring that the landmark would remain untouched for future generations to enjoy. One unexpected and unique story is that of a marsh rabbit, a rare species called Sylvilagus palustris hefneri, which was named after Hefner. Why, you ask? Because he provided financial support to help protect this endangered rabbit. It's one of those quirky facts that shows how diverse Hefner's interests were, extending even into the realm of wildlife conservation. Animal rights and protection were causes close to Hefner's heart, and many playmates who worked with him were involved in advocacy efforts as well. Among them were the Barbie twins, who spoke highly of Hefner's commitment to helping animals. He provided a platform through Playboy that allowed centerfolds and others associated with the magazine to raise awareness and advocate for animal welfare. Hefner wasn't just an advocate for animals. He also stood for human rights. He was a firm supporter of same-sex marriage and believed that the fight for marriage equality was critical for preserving everyone's rights. Hefner warned that if same-sex marriage wasn't legalized, society would risk undoing the progress of the sexual revolution, pushing people back into a more conservative, puritanical way of thinking. This showed Hefner's forward-thinking stance on social issues, always pushing boundaries and challenging norms. His death. In 2017, at the age of 91, Hefner's life came to an end. He passed away at the Playboy Mansion, leaving behind a legacy that would continue to spark debate. The cause of death was sepsis, brought on by an E. coli infection. It was the end of an era, but Hefner had already made plans for his final resting place. In 1992, he paid $75,000 to secure a crypt beside Marilyn Monroe's in Westwood Memorial Park. Monroe had been featured in the first issue of Playboy, and Hefner believed that spending eternity next to her was an opportunity too sweet to pass up. After his death, Hefner's reputation was a subject of intense debate. Some people admired him for the empire he built, while others criticized the way he portrayed women. In fact, Suzanne Moore, a journalist for The Guardian, wrote that Hefner threatened to sue her after she called him a pimp. She argued that Hefner's business model involved the buying and selling of women, turning the exploitation of women's bodies into a respectable business. Other critics, like Julie Bindel from The Independent, believed that Hefner's impact on society was deeply damaging. They claimed he normalized the commodification of women's bodies, turning pornography into a legitimate industry. But it wasn't just journalists who had opinions on Hefner's legacy. His former girlfriend, Holly Madison, spoke openly about her time living with him at the Playboy Mansion. She described how Hefner encouraged competition between the women living there, leading to body image issues and insecurity. Madison believed that Hefner's legacy was built on the exploitation of women, with many of them being used for his professional gain. Even within Hefner's own family, there were tensions. According to a writer for Christianity Today, whenever Hefner's daughter, Christy, would visit the mansion, he would have it cleaned thoroughly to hide certain aspects of his lifestyle from her. This behavior highlighted the double life that Hefner sometimes led, presenting one image to the public while keeping other details hidden from his loved ones. Hefner's role in the sexual revolution has also been the subject of much reflection. Some argue that his influence has contributed to many of the challenges families and individuals face today regarding relationships, morality, and the adult entertainment industry. Critics believe that Hefner's empire played a role in stripping people of their dignity, reducing them to mere objects of desire in an industry that often dehumanized its participants. In 2022, a documentary series titled Secrets of Playboy aired, shedding light on some of the darker aspects of Hefner's legacy. Former employees and partners came forward with claims of misconduct at the Playboy Mansion, including drug use, sexual abuse, and manipulation. These revelations shocked many people who had only seen the glamorous side of Hefner's life. The company that now owns Playboy quickly distanced itself from Hefner, issuing a statement that emphasized how today's Playboy was not the same as Hefner's Playboy. They expressed support for the individuals who came forward to share their stories. Even Hefner's widow, Crystal, eventually spoke out. In a memoir she wrote years after his death, she described feeling trapped and controlled while living in the mansion. Her claims added yet another layer to the complex story of Hefner's life, showing that not everything at the mansion was as glamorous as it seemed. Hefner's life has been depicted in various ways, from documentaries to biopics. In 2017, Amazon released a series called American Playboy: The Hugh Hefner Story, which combined interviews, archival footage, and reenactments to tell the story of his rise to fame. There was also talk of a biopic starring Jared Leto, though it was put on hold following allegations against the film's director. Hefner's life came to an end, but the darkest secrets of his life emerged several years later. The woman closest to him, his third wife, opened up about the dark corners of the Playboy Mansion, and she revealed things nobody had expected. The memoir of Crystal Hefner. Crystal's life took a dramatic turn when she stepped into the infamous Playboy Mansion. From the moment she walked through its doors, it was clear that her life was about to change, but not in the way she imagined. The Playboy Mansion, with all its glamour, parties, and wealth, hid a darker reality. One of the first places that stood out to her was a bathroom just off Hugh Hefner's bedroom. This wasn't just any bathroom. It was a room draped in black marble, with a black tub, a black toilet, and heavy curtains that blocked out all the light. To Crystal, it felt like stepping into a shadowy part of Hefner's mind. It was eerie, dark, and suffocating. This strange room would become a constant reminder of the more mysterious and unsettling aspects of life at the mansion. When Crystal moved in, she quickly had to learn the unspoken rules. She was one of Hefner's 3 live-in girlfriends at the time, but in 2012 she became his third wife. She was 26. Hefner was 86. It was during this time that she began to notice odd details. Hefner had specific habits, one of which included changing his dinner menu on certain nights. Crystal could tell which nights he expected her to engage in intimacy, because instead of his usual chicken noodle soup and crackers, he'd order a BLT sandwich. Hefner relied on Viagra, but it had its consequences. He had taken so much that it left him deaf. After these nights, the girlfriends and any other guests Hefner invited would head to the shower to wash off the baby oil he insisted they use. This routine happened often, and even though it caused infections, Hefner wouldn't budge. It was always the same: baby oil and nothing else. Crystal observed this strange routine in silence, always questioning but never able to voice her concerns. One of the strangest things about the mansion was the 2 lovebirds that lived in a cage in Hefner's bedroom. These tiny green birds seemed out of place in this extravagant setting. But as beautiful as they were, Crystal noticed something disturbing. They kept dying. Each time one passed away, the staff would quietly replace it the next day without a word. No one seemed to care why they were dying. Were they catching some sort of infection, she wondered? Could it be something in the air, like the bacteria that had previously caused an outbreak of Legionnaire's disease in the mansion's famous pools? Eventually, Crystal discovered the sad truth. The birds had been dying of thirst all along because their water bottle was broken, and no one had noticed. It was a haunting reflection of the neglect hidden behind the mansion's glossy exterior. Crystal's entrance into the mansion was no accident. In 2008, after sending her photograph, she was invited to one of Hefner's legendary parties. She quit her psychology degree, moved in, and started a new chapter in life. But what she found was far from the dream she had imagined. "Once you went in," Crystal later wrote, "it was so hard to find a way out." When Crystal first arrived, she replaced Holly Madison, Hefner's former #1 girlfriend. Being Hefner's main girlfriend came with a certain status, but it didn't take long for Crystal to realize that something wasn't right. She began to see that the glamorous lifestyle came with invisible chains. The girlfriends had a strict 6 p.m. curfew and were not allowed to work. Every week they would line up to receive their allowance, which was essentially gas money. It became clear to her that everything at the mansion revolved around Hefner's control. Hefner's parties attracted celebrities, actors, and powerful men. Many of these men were notorious for preying on women, and the mansion became their meeting ground. Crystal found herself in a world where people took advantage of others, but at the time, it seemed normal. The control, the humiliation, it was all part of life in the mansion. Even when Crystal starred in The Girls Next Door, a reality TV show that followed the daily lives of Hefner's girlfriends, the control never lessened. The production company made $400,000 per episode, but Crystal saw none of that money. The show became Playboy's last mainstream success, running for 6 seasons. Despite the laughter and glamour on the screen, it was all a facade. Behind the scenes, life was far from what it appeared. After becoming Hefner's main girlfriend, Crystal initially felt important, but that feeling didn't last. She soon found herself asking, "How can this person really love me when they want 4 other people in the bedroom with us?" Hefner's lifestyle made her uncomfortable, and she felt more like a performer than a partner. The intimacy felt more like a chore, something she had to endure rather than enjoy. The other girlfriends didn't get along, and the atmosphere in the mansion was cold. They were all there for Hef, not for each other. The longer Crystal stayed, the more trapped she felt. "Everything was based on Hef's schedule," she recalled, "and I never got a say." Despite the image of liberation and freedom that Playboy was known for, her life was anything but free. As time passed, Crystal began to see Hefner in a different light. His parties, his friends, even the way he treated the women around him. It was all a way to create the illusion that he wasn't alone. But in reality, Hefner was a lonely man. He surrounded himself with people, but none of them truly knew him. And the few who did only saw glimpses of his vulnerability. "He cried during love stories," Crystal said, noting how deeply emotional he would get while watching movies. Despite everything, Crystal stayed until the very end. When Hefner proposed, he offered her a ring inside a music box that played a song from The Little Mermaid. It was a bittersweet moment, symbolic of the way Crystal had traded her voice for the chance to live in Hefner's world. She signed a prenup, grateful that their relationship's transactional nature was finally laid bare. But the darker aspects of life at the mansion never fully went away. Crystal discovered shoeboxes full of explicit Polaroids of young women, a collection that Hefner kept hidden. She shredded them, but the weight of what she had found lingered. The control, the manipulation, the way Hefner played the girlfriends off one another, it all became too much. By the time Hefner passed away, Crystal was struggling with her health. She was diagnosed with Lyme disease, breast implant illness, and toxic mold exposure. The mansion, with its grandeur and fame, had been slowly killing her. The intimacy had stopped years before, and she had transitioned into the role of a caretaker. Life became easier, but the emotional scars remained. After Hefner's death, Crystal looked back on her time at the mansion with a mix of confusion and anger. How had she stayed so long? Why did she feel trapped? She had lived in a world of power and celebrity, but it had masked her pain. "I played mind games with myself to survive," she admitted. She questioned why she had felt sorry for a man who had manipulated her and others. But despite everything, she stayed with him until the very end. Crystal's story is not just about her relationship with Hefner. It's about the ways power can disguise itself as love, how control can hide behind generosity. Looking back, she realized that her feelings had been manipulated. "Power is insidious when it masks itself as generosity," she wrote. It wasn't until she finally left the mansion that she understood just how damaging the environment had been. Today, Crystal is trying to reclaim her life. After years of being under Hefner's control, she's learning who she really is. She's left the mansion behind, but the memories and lessons remain. It's been a long journey, but Crystal is finally finding her way back to the light. The mansion, with all its glamour and fame, is now just a shadow of her past, a place she no longer needs to be.